Hey, Gundam Maniacs! Welcome to the Gundam Explained show. This is the special part 2 or day 2 of the Springtide celebration. Yesterday was part 1 on Stephen's channel where it was like the history of Gundam. Today we're going to be doing Gundam gaming because that's stuff we love to talk about, and to properly talk Gundam gaming. You know, it's for one thing, it's awesome to have Stephen around since we're like these gaming enthusiasts always talking gaming, but we got the Lord and Savior himself, Talos Mobius. What's up, man?
Greetings, I'm good. How about you? How about both of you, let's say?
No, doing good. Glad to have you here. It's fun to have a reason to talk Gundam stuff, you know, like always.
Always.
Yeah. Cool episode today where, again, we're doing the celebration. We're going to talk about gaming, which is stuff we love. And I have something funny I want to show because at Stephen's show yesterday with Vampy, which if you guys haven't checked that out, do so after this. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great.
Stephen, in your slide, which I loved, basically the presentation you had going on through the whole thing, the production value.
I tried to be super professional about it, and we didn't even I don't even think we barely made it through everything because.
So there was more.
Well, I mean, I think we made it to just the end, but there was so much to talk about, and I mean, like I said, we could have talked to Vampy for like 4 more hours just riffing on stuff because
she knows the stuff, and I love how she likes to talk about it. Like,
yes. Oh man, it was so much fun.
Yeah, that was awesome. We're going to do that again. We're going to come up with some cool deep dive topics. But no, again, today we're going to talk gaming, and actually by the end of the episode, Stephen will announce the winner of that Verka, right? The Verka Zeta.
Yeah, so we got about 17 entries for the Master Grade Zeta Gundam Verka. I've already done the old Wheel of Fortune that you've used this in the past, the winner of the random. So yeah.
Well, cool. Well, before we hop into everything real quick, shout out to the chat. We got Zionic Shadow, who's part of the Springtide event. He's been posting some stuff up, doing giveaways. Check out Sieg New York and Zionic Shadow. Autonomous, good to see you. Johnny Tacoma. Let's see who else we've got here. Oshi-san, good to see you. Endless Croissant. That's making me hungry. But no, and then bring it up. I have the thing where I can click. I keep forgetting. Actually, I didn't set it up on the scene. I did, but I wonder if I could do that real quick. No, that's going to take time. No. But he says Gundam Unit 7 VTuber, and I wanted to call out the elephant in the room. Like Talos was like, "Hey Adam, should I go on as myself or with on?" So Talos's channel, link below, covers GBO2. If you guys need to know anything about GBO2 and want to get better, follow his channel. But
yes,
on his channel, he's talking to you as the Gundam 7th, and I love that. And so when he asked about today's show, I was like, yeah, dude, do it like that. I mean, up to you, but this is really cool. We all need to do that. Like get a Haro. So to start off real quick, I wanted to really just talk, we have Talos Mobius here for a reason. So as I started Gundam Explained, part of the big thing I like about Gundam is talking about the video games. And so I'll tweet stuff about video games, GBO2. And I remember Talos would reply with incredible knowledge, but also in a very kind way, which sometimes is rare on Twitter. So then that's kind of how we started talking. And he has taught me so much about GBO2, gaming in general with Gundam, especially wanting to play like older games that are hard to play. Talos has a lot of knowledge about like how to get that stuff going. Also, if you guys have seen some of my lore videos as of late, especially like the MS deep dives that has that cool music by my brother, a lot of that research is done by Talos. Either I'll come up with an idea or he will, and then he'll kind of write it out in a way.
Very few people. Oh, go ahead.
No, I would just say he can write it in a way that helps me. Like I can read it and say it, and it works. Like
no, Talos, we're just going to keep blowing smoke up Talos's butt today, but there are very few people, I think, especially online, that have such a detailed appreciation not only for video game mechanics and also Gundam like Talos does. You guys know me, you know how much I despise Gundam Unicorn and Banana Links and all of that stuff. But, in talking to Talos, he has a way that made me understand things. He made me understand that, Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn is really a love letter to the franchise.
Oh.
And So while it still is pretty far down my list of recommended watches, I have to acknowledge its place as
okay. Good. I'm glad you turned on that
of Gundam.
because originally,
But F91 still sucks.
oh my God, okay, that will be later. But no, isn't it like the heel? Like you were the heel. Actually, yeah, you are like the nice heel of this dynamic where you don't like F91 or Unicorn. But yeah, it's cool that you've come around to it. And it is funny because yeah, Talos, he has helped me sometimes really dive into like Unicorn or narrative stuff when I have questions. Because when I first got into Gundam, I think I talked about it yesterday on your show with Vampy, where the full armor Unicorn real grade was my first Gunpla when I didn't know what Gundam was. It just looked cool, and it was insane. But then I was like, well, I'll watch the show. And I remember watching it like, this is the dumbest thing I have ever seen. They're like talking exposition. Oh, the world, we have to be friendly to each other. But once you watch from the beginning and then get to that, I was like, okay, this actually works. It does. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. Now,
I will say this much, sorry to cut you off, but I gotta say that a lot of the reason as to why I do things that I do, where I just try to talk to people, because I realize very often, and I will quote the Unicorn to Steven's dismay, a lot of it is just conversation. People like Alter and Sertlat, who I have their icons here, that also help me at the channel, and you and Adam, Steven, are the reason that I still talk to people, because there is no point in just arguing rather than just simply talk. Yeah, at times I have horrible takes because I come from a different place than anyone else. I come from different experiences. But that's what conversing is, to try to understand each other, I'd say. And that's why I try to learn about video games, try to learn about game mechanics, and point out, people say, oh, this doesn't make sense, or this sucks, or this and that. At times, you need to dive deep to figure out what's going on. And yeah, it takes a lot of time, but I'd rather use my time, my free time, doing something that I enjoy rather than just doing nothing.
Yeah, and I think you put it a good way, because it's easy to like just not care or dismiss something, but when you're with a lot of other like-minded enthusiasts, you can learn more about something you might have not cared about before. So it's one thing that's I think helped. Yeah, the community has kind of helped solve this.
Yeah, if there's anything we've learned, it's that Gundam fans are a passionate bunch, and especially when it comes to video games, there's entire swaths of fans that just write off video games, Gundam video games in particular, because of like, oh, I don't like this mechanic, or this seems unbalanced and stuff like that. And I mean, yeah, in talking to like Seiji, for instance, with the example of Extreme Versus, I think Extreme Versus is a game that I have always thought, I'm like, man, I don't want to play this. It's like floaty, and it doesn't, like, I don't appreciate it. But then him and Shirtlad being able to kind of articulate to me like, oh no, it's not. You're playing it like it's a third-person action game when really it's like a 3D fighting game, and you need to treat it like Street Fighter but in 3D. And I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Same thing with GBO2 and Talos, is it's like I'm sitting here crying about the rock, paper, scissors mechanic, and he's like, no, you don't understand. Is like the reason it works this way is in order to create team balance, and this is why we have to make sure that we get teams of like 5 or 6 per side, because otherwise, a team of raids will just go ham on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh man, so much. And we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But thanks guys for talking, because it gave me time to fix and put up that little feature chat. So yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything you want to add as we talk about like favorite games of Gundam, and throw them in and we'll talk about them. So during your stream yesterday, one thing I learned, which was awesome, is when you had the slide about the first Gundam game.
Yeah.
And I when I saw that, I was like, wow, that looks awesome, because 84, I think it was, or something.
83, 84, something like that.
Super early. And so I acquired what's called a RGB 30. It's like these little retro handhelds that can play up to like PS2, although I don't think I've tested PS2 on that. I've done Dreamcast. But when I went to look at it, I found that it had that same Gundam game. And
that looks familiar.
It actually is. It would be cool if I did a screen share. Plan to do a screen share. Oh, I have to hit start or something. Yeah. But I mean, it looks just like what you showed me in this beginning part. You're like walking around. I got hit. You're trying to walk around with the RX-78-2 in the background without getting hit by stuff, but then you just walk to the cockpit to get in, which it's neat. And then the next level is and it's funny because it's 1984, right? And I guess I sometimes don't realize what people were capable of, developers. But
Yeah.
for 1984, if I played that game then, and that was like my only way to get my Gundam fill, I would be totally happy with that.
It's pretty awesome, and like the mobile suits are like recognizable. Like I remember playing some old like Intellivision games where it was like the box art looked fantastic. Like you have this watercolor painted barbarian on the front, but then you go to play it and it's just like a little orange dot that you're moving around like a maze. But yeah, I mean, you look at that game and all of the mobile suit models, they're recognizable, and it's got this very interesting sort of two-stage like play style, right? Because it's like first you're kind of dodging, you're playing like a dodging game trying to get into the Gundam, and then once you're in the Gundam it's like a rail shooter, right?
Yeah, and that's cool because for a little bit I was like, well, what's the point of the stuff falling? But it could be you're being attacked, the white base is being attacked, maybe things are falling, you're trying to get into the I gotta say, super impressed with a 1984 Gundam game. So, and then since then there's been some other Gundam game releases, like it's like SD stuff too. What's that?
Just one or two.
Oh yeah, just one or two. but really, like, in the 80s, like I can't really recall, a lot of games. There's one game I played. I think I even live streamed the whole thing on my channel a couple years ago. It was a 1989 SD Gundam like shooter, and I think it was like a vertical shooter. And I remember playing through it. And I remember one of our supporters, Sayla, was in the chat while I was playing, and she was helping like name the mobile suits, but their sprites are so different. So it's like, what is that? Yeah, it's okay. So that first Gundam game we were just looking at, there's been other Gundam games that came out since. So then there was a point to where we got into Gundam, and then there's a point where we played our first Gundam game. So Talos, what was the first Gundam game you played?
The first Gundam game that I played actually was Dynasty Warriors Gundam, the very first one.
Oh, that's cool. And did you already know about Gundam at this point?
I knew it only as a series. I had to watch 0080 War in the Pocket on TV, and I was like, this is cool. I wonder if there are games, because I had already Transformers Prelude for Energon, which was what got me into Mecha to begin with, I will be honest. And I was like, maybe there are other games. And I went, and it was on the PS3, and I was like, I have a PS3. I'm going to grab it. And then it went all downhill.
Now,
that's what led also to me watching 00 as well afterwards, when I got Dynasty Warriors 3 as well, ironically.
Did you ever play any 00 games? Because I don't know if there's many. I think there's one on DS or something.
There is one on DS, but I never had a DS. I never had really any major Nintendo consoles other than the Wii itself.
Okay, yeah. So others in the chat, like, be sure to list your first Gundam game. I'm curious. Like McLeod917 is saying Zionic Front got it with Ace Combat 4. So I see the relation there, and I'm kind of that same. Like, seen a Gundam game like Ace Combat. There's Autonomous is saying, of course he would know. There's a 00 Gundam Meister on the PS2. That's right. That's right.
I can look for it easily here, honestly. You can find those easily in old stores.
And then no one knows who that is. I think emulating Gundam Wing Endless Duel was my first. Oh, that's cool. That's a cool way to go about it. Yeah, because that's interesting. So it's like you could love Gundam, want to play a game, but it's not available anywhere.
Yep.
So I'll get to that. But Stephen, what was your first Gundam game? And you've probably said it 20 times already.
I was gonna say you and I had the first same Gundam same Gundam first game. Then we both played Rise from the Ashes first.
Oh, that's for some reason I thought Zionic Front, but I guess Zionic Front was just a favorite.
Yeah, Zionic Front was one of my early favorites, but my first Gundam game was Rise from the Ashes, and it was because I watched Gundam Wing on Toonami, and I think I said this yesterday. I was like, a Gundam game on Sega Dreamcast? Like, finally, Dreamcast is getting some games. And I picked it up, and I was like, where the hell's the Wing Gundam? What the it's a GM. I don't...
That's funny, because even though, Rise from the Ashes was my first Gundam game, I would consider that my favorite Dreamcast game for a long time when I didn't even know it was Gundam. I was just like, this is just how I would want a mech game, which I think it blurs the line between like simulation and arcade. It's like that right spot. And I played it recently on the channel, did a review, and I still think it holds up. But
yeah, I mean, give that game a new like graphics overhaul and like everything else.
Some other quality of life options.
Yeah,
and it would still work. But it's funny because going back to what we were just talking about a second ago, when I then got into Gundam, I was like, oh, let me see what Gundam games exist. And then that's when at first I saw Rise from the Ashes, and I'm like, oh my God, that whole
core
time.
memory unlocked.
And then the other one was like, well, what's available right now? And there was nothing. And this was 2018, because what it was GBO2 was out.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, so my first Gundam game when I got into Gundam was GBO2, which it's crazy because I sound like I'm 5, because that was not so long. But no, so different types of Gundam games. That's what I want to go to next, okay? Because I think it's very interesting how I wouldn't say that there's like and guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a Gundam game that is loved by everyone that is like at its core like a Gundam game? It plays like you would expect Gundam. It's not like a fighter. It's not a this or that. And I would almost say GBO2, except for it. I think there's a high barrier of entry for that game.
My suggestion would be actually Senki.
Oh, what was this?
GBO2 gatekeeps itself by
It does. Talos, what were you saying?
I say that the only game that I've heard that feels like a Gundam game where it's placed in the UCU universe that I've not heard at all bad things generally is 0081, or also known as Senki, because I think it was at the same at the time of its release, it was an exceptional game. Now, for one of the least loved games, I'd say it's Targeting Sight or Crossfire, because on its original, like in English release on the PS3, it had the low frame rate, so it was mostly unplayable. But if you run it in an emulator with a good PC right now, you can run it at 60 FPS, which fixes all of its major issues.
I need to do that, because that's a good point. Like, especially if you're a current Gundam fan, you're trying to find more games to play. Like, the PS3 seems to have a lot of good Gundam games.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I rebought a PS3. I used to have that 60 gig fat that was backwards compatible with everything.
Yep.
And then I sold it. And then I bought one again recently, so you and I could play that 0081 online or whatever.
But you also played Gundam Unicorn on PS3.
Yeah.
Which that's one I still haven't played, but that's the FromSoft one.
Yeah, exactly. So then I played it was that Unicorn. I got basically I was trying to build that PS3 backlog because there's a lot of good stuff on there. But what's interesting about the Unicorn game is made by FromSoft, very high production value, but the game is just okay. And it's funny because that new not front mission, I always get them confused. What does FromSoft Armored Core? Thank you. Yeah,
that was so funny. The discourse on Twitter, everyone saying like, "Oh man, imagine if FromSoft did a Gundam game. Like, it'd be amazing."
So, what's funny about that is I then found out that there's another Gundam game they made. Yeah. And I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, but I need to check it out. And so what I really want to do is dive into the mechanics, because I think, and again, I'm looking backwards. Like, if I was a Gundam fan at the time and I heard From Software was making a Gundam game, I would shit my pants for days. But playing it's very much more like the Armored Core, but even then scaled back. But if you like Unicorn and you like Gundam, it does give you that experience. The music is great. The graphics are great. So that's just an interesting example of that.
Now, I got to give a shout to Ultronimus in the chat, because he brought up Gundam versus Zeta Gundam, which you guys know is like probably, if it's not my favorite game, it's definitely in my top 5 Gundam games. And I think that one is one that is universally loved. It's before the sort of aerial combat that they introduced in the Extreme Versus series, so it's a little bit more grounded, and it has like a full story mode as opposed to just an arcade mode. So it's like it almost kind of captures that, like, this is what a Gundam game should feel like.
Yeah, that's a good one too. It's hard sometimes because okay, so let's get to this other point. I feel like we're going to go everywhere.
Sorry, we're jumping all over.
No, because you brought up I think the other thing I really want to talk about, and we We mentioned it a little bit in yours yesterday, just about Gundam as a whole, how there's different ways you can enjoy and like and get into Gundam. But it's kind of like the same thing with the video games, because it could depend on what you want out of a game, a Gundam game, but also what kind of games you would or wouldn't play. So, for instance, I think if you watched your show from yesterday, we talked about people that are just in it for the Gunpla. There's games for that. There's, the Gundam Breaker games. And then there's crossover for people that just love Gundam anyway. And then you get games like SD Gundam Battle Alliance, where it's like, who's this for? Because it's like, it's got some good action, but I'm looking at some SD Gundams. Okay. Well. Yeah. And then GBO2, PvP hardcore kind of game. And then you get the versus games, where are these kind of meta-based fighting games, and highly competitive. And and then we get like the standard action games that would be like Lost War Chronicles, Ionic Front, Rise from the Ashes, that then all got compiled into that PS3 collection. And so that's kind of like the action story games, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like even though I'm a huge Gundam fan, I prefer more of the action story types. I like that the competitive exists, especially GBO2, because I view it as like a museum, an encyclopedia, and then I'm experiencing it, because the weapons they come with in GBO2 is usually on par with what comes with the Gunpla or what's in a show. So
it's true.
There's that connect there. Now, with you guys, what kind of Gundam game do you prefer? Talos?
To answer that question, as I said originally, Target Insight or Crossfire, whichever you prefer again for the name of it, is probably one of my more beloved Gundam games, in the aspect of it feels like what GBO2 was intended to be and what GBO2 would be if it was a single-player game. I don't think I've played another game similar to GBO2 other than GBO2 itself, obviously Code Fairy and Crossfire. Although the major thing that made also Crossfire fascinating is, unlike GBO2, where if your legs or head breaks, where you just repair it at the base, if you lost an arm in Target Insight, you lost that arm.
It's pretty good. I'm gonna have to check that out.
And not only that, but also things like being able to toss the shield aside to free up another arm to do other moves, to be able to use double beam sabers, to be able to fire the Vulcans along with your primary weapon, to be able to use multiple weapons in general in conjunction with each other. The fact that the PS3 game had all of that, and the only thing that stopped it was the junk that the engine had, is kind of fascinating, but also disheartening in the aspect of, very often you're going to hear people talk about Crossfire like it's this horrible game that was horribly optimized, which for the era that it was optimized, yeah, it was. I'm not going to deny it. But you can play it and play it really good.
Yeah, every time I see either you mentioned it or screenshots of it, it's like, I need to try it. And I think I need to make that a thing for this year. I need to complete 0081, which I'm still stuck in.
Yeah, let's log on together, the three of us, and see if we can't tackle some of these more difficult missions, like where you've got to defend tanks from Animal Gato and just
well, and the main thing is because that's an example of a game that has really good controls for, like, if you were going to play a Gundam game, that approach to the systems, the mechanics, that's the way you would go if you want to kind of balance the simulation and arcadey, because that other part that is very much preferences, you want to be in the cockpit or not. I know there's the first person and third person, which is different in each game. First person doesn't necessarily mean you're in a cockpit, right?
Right.
But there's something about being in a cockpit where that's part of the mechanics of the game, like Rise from the Ashes. And then the other part, so like Code Fairy is an example of a more recent release that plays like a kind of just a classic action game with story.
Yeah.
But I don't know, even I sometimes forget about that game. And I don't know what it is, because it's cool. But I wonder if it was too much like GBO2, that it's just easily overshadowed by GBO2. Just because there's obviously more suits. Some of those hard missions in Code Fairy are BS later on, because you have to like perfectly get.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to basically time out the use of your pilot skills and everything, and it's like,
My
yeah.
thought on the matter is, right, GBO2's Code Fairy came out as an expansion for GBO2. The problem is that when you try too hard to attach one thing to another game, you kind of lose the identity that that game has as a separate game. Very often you're going to hear as the God of War series, but you don't hear often about the God of War or Ragnarok, for an example, using an example that kind of came to my mind. You hear of the Resident Evil series, but you don't hear of specific Resident Evils. People will talk which is the best Resident Evil game, but all of them are so tied together, which I think that's what happens with GBO2 and Code Fairy. Code Fairy tries to be a universal century story while trying to keep an element of GBO2 and trying to fit a story in the aspect and the playstyle of GBO2, which is a lot more constrained. And unless you make an actual Universal Century 1 year war story where they try to add the Titania, which is literally a borderline hyper-performance camper. It's a tankier camper, but also a faster camper. Doesn't make sense. Don't ask me. Then they have the things like the Dominomeries, which doesn't look like it came out of Universal Century. It's so detached, but also trying to attach itself to Universal Century and GBO2, where it became its own you kind of like Thunderbolt on accident, but it's too much to be on its own, so it's still an attached entity to GBO2. It's a little like a mess, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I like this idea you brought up just a second ago about identity and games cohesion in a series, because even with Resident Evil, like for the longest time, I would say 4 is the best, but then they remade 2 to play like 4. They remade 4 to play like a Super 4, and then they are probably going to do that with the rest to kind of give it a cohesive identity of gameplay, of what to expect, the kind of more tactical, over-the-shoulder, third-person. And that's interesting because I think Resident Evil is such a specific IP, you probably couldn't do that with Gundam. And so some other Gundam like game types that are real popular that I didn't mention is like the strategy games. So the SD Gundam G Generation, like those can be SD and I don't care, because back in the NES days, things had to look SD. I mean, technically Mario is an SD character, like if you think about it. And then bring up another thing, and this is why I had Aoshi-shan's thing up here, is UC Engage, because that is another game you can get into. A little bit of strategy. It's more of the auto battler, but there is a degree of strategy and stuff.
I mean that and like the Gundam Breaker Mobile, they're basically idle games, you know, like.
And you know what? And I got to say, like, there are people that were very disappointed when that Gundam Breaker Mobile got shut down. Yeah. But the fact that they are then kind of like offloading to then come out with Gundam Breaker 4 is pretty cool, because they're going to make sure they're getting all the players there. But I got to say, it's a missed opportunity to keep Gundam Breaker Mobile going and then make it where you can link the accounts and cross over stuff.
Yeah, why not?
I know. Because, like, let's say you're at home playing Gundam Breaker 4, but then you got to go out and do stuff. You can still have Gundam Breaker with you. But I don't make the
do that with G Generation. Like with G Generation Genesis, you know, you could do the save links between the PS4 copy and the PS Vita copy. So it was like, okay, you know.
and we're getting that new one, Eternal, I think.
Yeah.
G Generation, that's going to be excellent when that comes out.
And, you know, there's also
room for like turn-based tactics games. I don't think that necessarily factors into the discussion of like what makes a Gundam feeling game, right?
I agree. I agree, because I think it's almost like, I feel like strategy or turn-based games, it's almost like a genre in itself for people that don't necessarily play video games all the time, but they like to chill. What were you saying, Talos? I think.
Sorry.
You know what's you're fine. You know what's really funny is that speaking on the save link, there are a lot of games that are now doing it nowadays, right? Warframe is turning 11 years old game now, and it did it recently. I don't think that there is really a limitation other than how much a company is willing to invest in a game to do that. We see a lot more often now games to be able to go cross-save, cross-play, and the likes. And I don't understand why people are very hesitant to say, you know what, someone is going to probably buy both the Nintendo and the PS5 edition. I'm looking at you, Goose. I mean, what? So why not make it so that you can link your profile, as you put it. Why not make it? Cloud save is now the most common thing that you can do in the gaming industry. I don't understand really.
Cross save is a very powerful tool in the game developer, game publisher's toolkit as far as monetization goes, because my hesitation to want to buy the same game on another system would be dictated by the fact that I have to start from zero. But if you told me, like, hey, all the progress that you made in Gundam Battle Alliance on Switch, if you would hop over onto the PlayStation version, you're good, then I'd be more willing to cough up that money. So it's like, you know, we talk a lot about like game monetization and like whether freemium strategies and like live service games are necessarily the way to go. But, you know, I think that there are certain acts of goodwill and certain quality of life features that you can build into a game. And like you said, they're almost standard now. That would really go a long way in buying player loyalty.
Yeah, especially, you know, this is a good topic too, because like if Bandai's wanting to push this kind of metaverse where, you know, you're always in their ecosystem of Gundam to spend money. That's why I brought up the thing before about Gundam Breaker 4 not coming out on Xbox. I think that's a mistake. But companies make mistakes like Gundam Evolution. But the other part of that is like nowadays habits have changed considerably. And I think sometimes executives can overlook that because they're living their slice of their life and then dictating how games should be. Just like, wasn't it Bob Iger said recently in a sales interview, like, oh, kids are playing video games. And it's like, oh, really? Again, kind of an example. But and so that's the thing. Like, I have my ROG Ally I talk about a lot. I have this that I got recently in my PC. I actually have it where my entire ROM collection is synced between those three devices. So I can go anywhere and continue my progression in any game. Like it is crazy. And that's the thing. So when that like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the newest one that came out, if you buy it on Xbox, you get it on Xbox and PC. It's not even a Microsoft game. It's a Sega game, and they made it cross play, cross progression. I love it. I could play on my PC, play on my Xbox, play on my ROG Ally. But then like other games will come out and I'm like, okay, which platform should I buy it on? Because if I want to be portable, I want to be able to, you know, and I'll do that. I've made videos where on the ROG Ally, I can log into my PS5 and play GBO2, and it's good enough. But I do think habits have changed. We're seeing companies understand this, and I do think there really needs to be that cross play, cross progression. It'll just help. And I think with the Gundam metaverse, this whole idea, and I even think that the beta or whatever's going on, the closed beta for that metaverse game, that would be the way to do it. Have it where you can have these multiple Gundam games on multiple, you know, services and platforms, but you have that one account. You can access them anywhere. We just need to get that Elden Ring, that Quad A Gundam game, you know, like that's it's like that's what needs to happen. It's like Gundam games are good, but I think they need to set out to make what would be called a system seller, even though and I mean, we've talked in the past about like the idea that there's a lot of different sort of games that have been skinned with Gundam, right? Like a Battle Assault is basically just like a Street Fighter or Marvel versus Capcom that's just skinned as Gundam. You know, there's just so many, like, we're just going to take something that already exists. A Gun Evo is Overwatch, but with a Gundam skin. Exactly.
There's really, and it goes back to the point you were making, Talos, about like identity. And this is something that, you know, we were talking about, you know, in terms of like AAA and Quad A games that, you know, they try to do too much. Like every game has to have a crafting mechanic. Every game has to be a third-person action game that has like, you know, left trigger to aim, and like, you know, there's all of these like sort of just givens. Everything has to exist. It has to have RPG elements, but not too many. And, you know, that's my fear with the idea of creating like the perfect Gundam game, is does it become this mess of mechanics that are kind of grafted onto each other, or is there something that can capture that Gundam identity that has the narrative element that everyone is going to go for? And Talos, I would be very interested to hear, you know, what are the like top 4 or 5 components that you would implement to make said perfect Gundam game?
In all honesty, first of all, I think that there's some sort of, not exactly an open world, I'd say more of an open area world, right? To begin off of that. Because battles in Gundam worlds are not in a small scale where you're in a room. I'll say that straightforward. You have massive battles like the Battle of Odessa, the Battle of Abaku, the battle for the grips, right? All of these, they are not small scale. You cannot have a Gundam restricted in small maps. GBO2 does it in a sort of team deathmatch competitive match, right? That's not. Although the feeling, I guess you could say, is Gundam-esque. The battles are not purely Gundam. This is the Gundam fights that exist in GBO2 are not purely Gundam fights. They are tournament fights, at least in my perspective. And that comes from someone that is a GBO2 stan. That's not coming from anyone else.
That's not coming from me, which I have my own beefs about that.
A Gundam game would have to have a narrative. It would have to have choices that matter. Because in Gundam, right, everything that happens matters. We've seen it in the anime, we've seen it in manga, we've seen it in novels. Anything that happens affects the world. Ironically, I've been talking with a few people, including my soon-to-be wife, that, and you know, my soon-to-be wife knows ecology. That was the things that was studied in university, and the amount of impact, ecological impact that the colony drops had, you see it, and that's going back to Unicorn again, much to Stephen's dismay. Again, I'm gonna keep hearing that constantly. That nail. The area of Dakar lost in a straight line more than 50 kilometers of greenery. That's over 20 miles of greenery. So that means that the forest, the tropical forest region in front of Dakar is gone. So if you can do that in a game, that everything that you do impacts the narrative, I think that will be a true Gundam game in that perspective. Now, the rest of it would be, I wouldn't say full customization, but we've seen a lot of mobile suits that are custom mobile suits, right? We've seen the Gelgug we see it as a Gelgug GK in GBO2, where it's just a Gelgug with a Zigaki arm.
Yeah.
Those costumes, quote unquote, that are slightly modified, I think would be really interesting to see in such a game. Where, for an example, you can have, I guess you could say, the fourth system that I did implement is a nemesis system, where there is a rivalry.
Oh yeah, that would be cool.
Your stream just got demonetized for mentioning nemesis.
I know you're right. They tried to patent that. No, I like that choice thing you brought up. I didn't really realize how much of the narrative in a Gundam story is actually driven by character choice, because because a lot of times characters, they're pretty clear about where the characters are in the world and what they're trying to achieve. And just think of, if you're playing a Gundam game, what are you trying to achieve personally? Let's say as you play a game, there's options to be a force of destruction, or there's an option to be an explorer or collector. Through how you play and interact with characters, by the end of the story, it'd be neat if you've been more one side or the other. Like, let's say the final battle happens and it happens to be you're among a whole bunch of Zeon troops because you've just gone to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like peak BioWare games, like between like Knights of the Old Republic and the first couple of Mass Effect games, like that level of choices affecting the story would be very interesting to see.
Well, speaking of BioWare, did you ever play that Sonic Chronicles or whatever?
I didn't.
I didn't either, because I knew it was made by BioWare, and I was like,
yeah, that's why I said peak BioWare.
And to finish off the fifth one, and the fifth and final system, is I would like, because it would be probably a single player, or at the most like 4-man squad, right? To just say that there is a multiplayer, right? For the peak Gundam experience would be to have the minutia that GBO2 has. Where, first of all, there are accurate hitboxes where it matters where you shoot. Where your melee attacks matter if you're going to hit legs, arms. So a specifically well-designed combat system that uses Gundam's element of, you see very often in the Gundam mobile suits losing arms and legs. It's nothing of a surprise, because they are not human. They shouldn't be treated like they're human.
And you mentioned that earlier with Target Insight / Crossfire, is that, you know, that game had limb damage, but then its follow-up 0081 kind of stripped that away. It was almost like 0081 not only Well, I like the story of 0081 better, but
I do too.
it did strip away a lot of the more complicated mechanics that Crossfire was attempting to achieve. But I think that maybe the hardware of the PS3 was not quite where it needed to be to accommodate.
That is very probable.
Hmm.
Well, that would be the ultimate Gundam experience for me. An open area where you travel and what you do changes the environment. Heck, in that in the perspective, you damage the environment, you take environment distraction points, where you're ruining the ecosystem of the planet. There you go.
And that could maybe open up quest lines with certain people because you have certain ways of doing things.
I mean, especially if you had like kind of a tactical battle map that represented like areas of control and territory that you control that has been destroyed through battle is probably worth less than it would have been if you were able to neutralize the enemies without creating the collateral damage.
Oh, that's pretty good. But this is reminding me of Helldivers 2, because that's like a super popular game right now that has really defined mechanics. And it is super popular. But you know why I think it's super popular, other than because it's made well, is because it's not PvP. I really think people are very open to PvE, even if a game is hard. If a game is hard and they know that they can get their buddies and go fight some things that they can't associate with, that usually helps. And I mean, it would be easy. Like, that's just another example of you could take the structure of Helldivers, but make it feel Gundam. Because it's really just about, Helldivers, the way the movement works. You just tweak it to make it feel like you're in a giant mech, and then have it where just thinking of in Helldivers, how you go around, look for nests to destroy. You can go around, look for hangars where there's Zaku's hanging out, or GMs if you want to do that. But I think, Helldivers is especially the setup. Like in Helldivers, when you go to launch and you're sitting there and you're setting up your character, think if it's like, okay, I'm going to go with this GM. What do I want to take with me? Oh, I want to take actually 2 beam sabers. It's like there's so much opportunity with that. But
I will say this, sorry to cut you off.
No.
But I think that the thing that Gundam fans enjoy is how the world in Gundam changes constantly. It never stays the same. Every time you look, there's something different. In every episode, if anyone knows, Stephen knows, because he's breaking down Zeta. If anyone knows, again, it's him. People want to feel like their actions matter. Because Gundam is all about making a change, making an impact, leaving a mark, if you may even. We don't see that in Gundam games. The closest to that we see it in is scores and how many mobile suits have been destroyed. That's all that there is. Otherwise, you just follow a linear story or a PvP combat, and that's that. There is rarely any change that matters.
That's where Gundam versus Zeta Gundam got it right with its universal century mode, because you do have the ability to change history, in relation to the show. Like if you're playing as Char, you can save Garma. If you're, playing as Camille, you can save Roberto and Apoli and unlock these alternate timelines where things happen that shouldn't have.
Giren's Grid too, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, Giren's Grid does that really well.
But that's interesting because you just brought up another point. Helldivers has that system where when you play, it's like, okay, what map needs the most help? Or you're like, okay, now this planet has been taken over. Like there's like that game master component. So yeah, you further, I think, kind of proved how Helldivers system works. And I think there's a lot of those elements that can be used for the right Gundam game. What are some Gundam games coming out we know of? So there's Gundam Breaker 4, which, what platform is everyone buying that on?
I'll probably get it for console, but if I have the choice to, I might get it on PC as well, just to be able to play with a variety of people. That's literally it. I just want to play with people. That will be really fun.
And did they confirm or not? It's like not crossplay?
I don't think it's crossplay, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but we don't really know the news yet, but I doubt it's going to be.
Yeah.
If they are going to do that, I'm going to be more than happy. I'm going to be praising the GOG.
Yeah, that's tough because I would get it on PC, but I just don't like the fact that I might be leaving out. And the reason I get it on PC is because then I could play it on my ROG Ally, knowing that they're making it on Switch so it's probably going to play, very similar since they're both handhelds. But yeah, it would make sense. I hope they do crossplay. And so the other game coming out is that SD Gundam Eternal.
Yep. G-Gen Eternal.
Which, yeah, I love the idea of playing that as a mobile game.
I plan on spending many hours on the toilet. G-Gen Eternal.
Good way to put it. Yeah, drop some colonies. But no,
you can't say that.
But it would be neat when that comes out to be able to like screencast it to a TV.
Yeah.
And I love that you could like go down and like maybe start doing the things and then look up and then watching it play out. That would be pretty
That's
neat.
one of the things that like, I wish was more common now. There used to be like the hardware peripherals that you could get. And I used to have one of those Game Boy Advance blocks that plugged into the bottom of the GameCube so that you could play Game Boy Advance games on a television. And like now, obviously with the Nintendo Switch, like that's the same thing that they're trying to capture. They're trying to capture that same spirit of mobility and being able to switch between the two. I just wish every game did that, honestly.
That's what I'm saying. I think the writing has been there this whole time of gamers don't want to be locked down by where they are. People want to be able to play games wherever, not be like, okay, this is my game station. Yeah, that's neat if you want to, and I do sometimes, like I want to be in front of my big screen. But like, yeah, that's a good point. Nintendo, or actually they did it with Super Nintendo. They had the Super Game Boy that you plugged in. And then GameCube, and then the Wii U. So they always were trying to make it where, how could we juggle people always like being able to game wherever they are? And like Nintendo's super successful. Even when they do have their failures, they can bounce back.
And like PC does that, obviously, between the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, there's tons of other handhelds that can do those same types of tasks. It's really just Xbox and PlayStation that are dragging their feet.
Yeah, but rumor, and that's a good point too, because the rumor is both Sony and Microsoft have a handheld to announce, a non-streaming handheld, like an actual high-end, and they might as well do it since everyone else is doing it. Nintendo has done it. It's gonna be crazy, and so that will be good for Gundam because it's able to make these games more accessible in the long run everywhere. So the Switch itself has a handheld or TV mode. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's very interesting too, because some games run better when plugged in. And it's kind of like that with the ROG Ally, because if I have it plugged into the correct wattage adapter, you get like the graphics, I get the GPU works over time or something. So
it just works, okay?
Yeah, it just works. Yeah,
it just works.
Red Vion, we're hella lucky nowadays getting so much Gundam games so often. And I got to say, yeah, that's true from someone kind of recently getting into the Gundam gaming scene. Yeah, there's all that old stuff, but there is stuff that you could check out. And you know what? I don't mind that they come out with a hero shooter. It's cool to try, but it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
It's a cool try. So yeah. Well, cool. Well, I have talked a whole lot. What about you guys? Steven, do you wanna do a little announcement?
Sure, yeah. So as we mentioned yesterday, I've got a Master Grade Zeta Gundam Verka that my daughter picked out. I promise that she did not hand deliver it. The box looks good. But yeah,
like
we had
Cheetos and chicken nuggets all over
it. Yeah, it's just does your phone have games? But yeah, we do have a winner. I from the 15 to 17 people that made comments and told me what their favorite piece of Gundam media was. Our winner is Tyler Lucas 5773. So thank you, Tyler. We had a lot of great Gundam media shout outs, things like Zeta, 0083. 2 people mentioned MS Saga, which is
wow.
I'm like, speaking of video games, and especially video games that have like a not great reception in the West. One of these days, Adam, you and I have to just bite the bullet and play MS Saga.
Dude, I am down. Yeah, maybe that's how we do it. We kind of do it as a group play. Maybe,
Yeah.
and maybe we
You
have
and
it
I
where
are not JRPG guys,
We're not.
and so
we should
we
do
get
it.
bullied for it.
Yeah. Well, it should be one stream. Maybe I'm playing it, you're criticizing me, and then we flip it. You know, that would be perfect. Or what if one person plays for 2 hours and then the other person just has to pick up from there with no knowledge?
Oh my gosh. Especially with all of the minutia of character building, that would be silly.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I do want to give Tyler a shout out. I'm going to reach out to you, obviously, via YouTube and try to get the best way to send you the decals and the Zeta Gundam. His answer was favorite Gundam media would be Gundam on Blu-ray, which RIP to Right Stuff Media, because Right Stuff recently closed up shop. They were the ones that had the rights to distribute Gundam via Blu-ray. They were kind of expensive, but you know, it's one of those things where it was like, we talk about this a lot, the idea of physical media kind of going away.
Yeah.
And everyone always wants to know, like, oh, well, where do I start watching Gundam? How can I watch Gundam? And it's like, well, you better start sailing the 7 seas because, you know, like if you don't already have the DVDs in your collection, then good luck finding a way to watch anything legally.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing, you know.
It puts fans in a very tight spot.
But it's funny because this is also speaking to gaming. There's so many Gundam games people can't play because they're just not accessible unless you jump through hoops and know where to look. And yeah, it's kind of like that with the shows. It's like, where should I go to watch? And really, I think sometimes the Bandai YouTube does a good job of the Gundam Info YouTube.
Yeah,
because they'll be like, here's a whole series. So that's pretty cool. But there needs to be like either make it where the original Gundam is always on there or something. There's
especially older series
around between. Oh, go ahead.
Especially older series that you can't really find anywhere, like MS Igloo.
Yeah.
When was the last time you heard of MS Igloo?
I know. Yeah, I think I bought like the DVD off eBay or something. I forgot how I got it. But hey, so does that mean that if you have to buy the Gundam Blu-rays, you have to go through another source, or is it they're going to be done for now?
There's nobody publishing Gundam on DVD or Blu-ray anymore. Like Right Stuff Anime was the one; they were the ones doing it. And I have the Right Stuff Blu-rays for like the original series and Zeta and things like that. A couple of other series, and they're fantastic products. I mean, you don't get like a lot of special features and things like that. Like, I mean, I remember the early days of DVD where it was like every DVD was packed with like commentary and trailers and behind the scenes stuff. I would always plan when I was done with the movie, like the next thing I would do with it maybe a day later is just go through all the special features. Like
that was like a thing.
Disc of nothing but special features.
Yeah, and so that's interesting because I have almost all Universal Century Blu-rays, so I probably need to look and pick up the rest before they're like out of print. Because what I do is I buy the Blu-rays and then I rip them and I have them on my server, so I can, just like with my ROMs, I can watch them anywhere. That's this thread that technology has allowed people to kind of consolidate and manage what they want to consume, and I think if consumers can do that easily, that's just going to be a win for the corporations trying to make money. Make it easy for us to get this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that, like, Gundam fans, we've got lots of money. We want to give it to you, but you're making it very hard to do so.
I know.
I think that especially if it was something that it was easy access to every fan, right? Any made-to-be game, media, manga especially, because either you believe it or not, where I live, manga sells really well, but the only manga you find here for a Gundam is Thunderbolt. And you find like issue like 7 to 17, and you're like, where's the other 6 at the start? What am I looking at? Where am I starting from? So until I think corporations realize that they can spend a little bit more money but make tons of money afterwards, we're going to be stuck in this perpetual purgatory of trying to make companies listen to the fans, and the fans constantly yelling back and forth, and it's a broken telephone. That's all it is.
Well, yeah, good discussion. So let me ask you this. Is anyone actively, other than GBO2, because that's going to be the next 2 days, tons of GBO2 game playing, are there Gundam games you guys are currently playing or plan to get to soon? Talos?
On my end, actually, I'm gonna rerun 0081 because now I have the DLC for Senki, so I'm just gonna try to finish that off because why not? I'd like to get something more than
Good
the
luck
GPO
against
one.
Gato.
Yeah.
It's not either you believe it or not. It wasn't as bad as long as you just have a fully decked out 7th. Ironically,
Wow. The
It
seventh
took a lot
Gundam
of
is broken
grinding.
in every game that it's in. I think most
Oh.
people would agree.
Oh yeah, especially since I have due to the DLC, I have the full armor 7th. So equipping it with the double beam rifle of the 7th, you can melt most things really quickly. Thankfully. Other than that, I guess I'm rerunning again. Ironically, just on the highest difficulty Crossfire, and afterwards I'm aiming to get back into Dynasty Warriors Gundam Reborn because I never actually finished it. I finished all the others, but I want to finish that up.
Good picks. What about you, Steven?
Char's Counterattack on PS1. The game that kind of plays like the Zeta Gundam game on PS1.
I need to go play those. Yeah. I haven't beat it yet, but I'm trying to finish the 3DS Gundam game, which is really good. It's just
it's so good.
It is. It's surprisingly good, but it's because it's basically around the mechanics. There's a lot of grinding because it's like you'll be at a certain story point. It's kind of tough. You gotta grind, but there's a lot of leveling you can do with each suit, which is pretty amazing. And like that is the main one, but like in between all that, I am trying to get myself to be like, okay, I need to sit down and get through 0081 because that was it like that Efreet that would come out on like level 3 and just own me, and I'm like, what am I doing?
Double beam spray guns. That's the secret.
Okay, you told me that. I got to remember. Yeah. I'll let you know next time I try it. Well, so yeah, that just about does it. Anything else that we have not mentioned today?
Oh,
well, cool.
Good.
Well, I think we covered everything.
Yeah. Having 3 people that are gamers talking about Gundam games. Wow, that goes by pretty quick. That was a lot of fun, especially everyone in the chat filling in. And in hindsight, I think it's cool that I would click to show people's answers because in the future, if you can't view the chat, at least you could see what people have been saying. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So stay tuned next couple days, not here, but check Twitter.
Rebel Vion.
Yeah, Rebel Vion.
Shoutcasting.
Shoutcasting. Thank you, Steven. Thank you.
I got you.
Yeah, check out his YouTube, his Twitter. Same with Aoshi-san, Lord Talos Mobius, Zionic Shadow. There's so many people that are a part of this. If you just go to Twitter and look at our socials or handles, you'll see who we're following, who's liking things, because it's kind of fun the next few days or next couple days of GBO2 and more Gundam gaming. So
you'll see us again in the next 2 days at least.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so everyone, thanks for everyone that joined. We'll talk later. Have a good one.
Later.